Okay, team, last but not least, and probably my favorite section is the three different energy systems. So we've talked about all of the fuel, the supply, the enzymes, the idea behind how these things work, but they get very specific when it comes to the utilization of the different energy systems. And so we have three of them. We have the phosphocreatine system or the PCR system. That's going to be an immediate source. We have glycolytic system, that's going to be fast and also very anaerobic. And then we have oxidation phosphorylation, which is going to be slow and a very aerobic or oxygen based system. And so over the next few slides, we're going to break down each one of these things and kind of bring it as like a big take home at the end of it. So our phosphocreatine or PCR system is going to be an immediate energy source, and it does not require oxygen. This fuel is going to be utilized through phosphocreatine, and it comes in a very limited supply. This is the simplest form of an energy system that we have in our body. And we utilize this in immediate sources. So I can't stress that enough. This is going to be that like quick. If a bear were to come into a room and you need to get out quick, this is what you're going to use. And so it is the anaerobic substrate level metabolism, meaning that this is the like simplest form that we can get. It is only going to yield 1 ATP and 1 PrC mole of ATP, and it is only going to last about 3 to 15 seconds. So because the ATP stores are very limited, this pathway is mostly used just to reassemble ATP. So we will utilize the ATP, and then we have a storage of this PCR or the phosphocreatine. Phosphocreatine is also very high energy based molecule, and this will come and it will pick up that ATP that's been broken into inorganic phosphate and adenosine diphosphate, and it will pull them back together to create another ATP before it splits back again. And it's a very quick cycle that occurs. So it's not necessarily going to create a ton of ATP for us, but it's going to help put them back together so that we can utilize them very fast. And this is what I just explained because I got ahead of myself because I get really excited when I talk. But we have this idea between ATP recycling. So we have our phosphocreatine that is available in the cell. It is going to attach to create our creatine kinase, which is our enzyme that is released. And it is going to speed up the production so that we can take the creatine and we can add it to the inorganic phosphate and we will create ATP. Phosphocreatine energy can not be utilized for cellular work. However, it can be used to reassemble the ATP that's been broken or utilized. So it's going to help us replenish the ATP storages during rest. So if we, for example, did a heavy lifting set, we might have used the ATP-CP system. So we utilize ATP through this system, and we need to rest in order to replenish that phosphocreatine and energy system for us to be able to reutilize that later. This will recycle ATP during exercise until it is used up, typically about 3 to 15 seconds. And then just so everyone's aware, in order to like reestablish this system, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes of rest after you do something or after you utilize the system for it to be fully rested and ready to go again. Again, I'm not going to click on this for you guys, but this is just, you can literally get an animation out of this if you click on it on your own copy of this PowerPoint, but it tells us this phosphocreatine, right, will break off and it will adapt to this inorganic phosphate and ADP from this free energy to create ATP for us. The glycolytic system, another one of my faves because I utilize it probably a lot. And this is the anaerobic or lactic acid energy system that also does not require oxygen to utilize. This fuel is going to be primarily from carbohydrate or in glucose, but it is in a somewhat limited supply. The glycolytic system is very anaerobic. It will yield a little bit of ATP for us, so 2 to 3 moles of ATP through 1 mole of substrate, in this case, carbohydrate or glucose. It's usually going to last anywhere from 15 seconds to 2 minutes, and it breaks down glucose via glycolysis. And so that is how we utilize the carbohydrate or glucose molecule that we ate and how we produce it into ATP, which is our form of energy. The glycolytic system does have some pros with it. So, one, it's going to allow the muscles to contract with limited oxygen. It is going to permit shorter term, high intensity exercise than oxidative metabolism can sustain. So, if you play a sport like football or basketball or something that requires really quick running that is usually under 2 minutes in time, and you'll have some sort of recovery afterwards, the glycolytic system is going to be something that you want to train to become very efficient over a long endurance or aerobic based training system. The cons here is that it doesn't really produce a ton of ATP for us, and it can be an ineffective use of a substrate when we want to utilize and get the biggest bang for our dollar out of everything that we consume. The lack of O2 creates pyruvic acid, and when oxygen is not available, it will turn into what we call lactic acid. Lactic acid over time will impair glycolysis and muscle contractions to occur. And most of you, if you've done some sort of exercise where you've had that burning sensation in your muscles, that is what we like to call lactic acid. Now, the glycolytic system, you guys, the enzyme that we use in this system is called phosphofructose kinase, or PFK. So PFK is that rate limiting enzyme, right, that will help us speed up the production or slow that down. So when we have a decreased amount of ATP and an increased amount of ADP, because the ATP has been broken and utilized, we have an increase in phosphocreatine kinase. When ATP is increased and we don't have a lot of ADP, the enzyme is then pulled back and it is inhibited, and we will have a decrease in phosphocreatine kinase. This is also regulated by products of the Krebs cycle as well. But glucose or glycolysis is a max of about 2 minutes of exercise, and we would need other pathways for longer endurance or longer durations. And that will come from those aerobic based things that we'll get into next. I think it's important for us to understand that lactate can actually be our friend, and we can utilize lactate to actually keep going with exercise. So lactate can be an important fuel source during exercise, and our muscle can utilize lactate in 3 really cool ways. And the first one is going to be that when we produce lactic acid, the cytoplasm and can actually pick it up in the mitochondria with inside of that same cell. So as we produce lactic acid as a byproduct, our mitochondria takes it like a straw in that cell and sloops it back up, and then it can be used in the same muscle fiber and oxidize back out to utilize for energy. Lactate can also be shuttled around. So lactate can be transported to other cells where it can then, same thing, be scooped up by the mitochondria and then oxidized there. And we call this like a lactate shuttle. And then the third way is something we call the Cori cycle, and the lactate can be recycled back to the liver, converted into pyruvate, and then it can be converted back into glucose through glucogenesis, where we can then utilize it as energy. So I know that we in sport sometimes always talk about lactate as being a very negative thing, but the reality of it is like it's this really cool way the body utilizes this byproduct and makes it into something that we can use to keep moving forward. Sorry, I nerd out over stuff like this. I think it's all ADP. This